Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Mike Jesh. I'm the lead FAST team representative for the FAA safety team in the Long Beach FSDO, and it is my distinct pleasure tonight to be able to host this pilot controller forum for controllers from the Socal TRACON terminal radar control facility down in San Diego. And they control so much of our airspace around this busy airspace, Los Angeles down to the Mexican border. And we've got air traffic controller and pilot outreach manager Rob Reddeg will be joining us in just a couple moments to tell us everything we need to know to be operating safely in this airspace. So that's the first part of the thing here. I am a flight instructor, a part-time flight instructor based out of Fullerton Airport. Stay pretty busy flying my little 182, doing a little instructing around the area in that. By night, I'm a 787 captain for a major airline. I just got back from Madrid the other day. That was kind of a fun trip. And so I've been flying in this airspace for a really long time, and I really enjoy talking with the controllers who operate this airspace and help keep us all safe and separated. But there's a lot of tricks to operating around here. If you've got a better idea what's going on, it'll make you a better, safer pilot and help expedite all of our getting in and out of the airports around here. So I'm going to start with launching just a quick poll here to gather some demographics of the people in the room here. And so if you got a couple of seconds, you should be able to check in there and let us know what kind of a pilot you are, what kind of pilot certificates you have, whether you're instrument rated, if you're a flight instructor, and so forth. And I'll let that run while we do a little bit more of the rest of the intro here. While that's running, what I want to talk about is how we're going to be able to communicate with each other with air traffic control and with the FAA FSDO here in Long Beach. We're going to mostly use the Q&A feature for that. So down toward the bottom of the screen, you should see a Q&A button. And if you mash on that button, you should see an opportunity here to ask a question. And this is going to be something that we'd like you to direct toward the air traffic controller. We've got Rob and a couple of his friends from the facility down there. But they're going to be busy talking and doing their presentations. So Nate and I are going to take care of forwarding these questions on to them. So use that, please, for questions that are directed toward Rob and his crew. And if you got anything else, if you want to chat amongst yourselves and kibitz and peanut gallery stuff, the chat feature works really well for that. We probably will not be paying much attention to the chat dialogue in real time as we go. So I prefer you use the Q&A for questions and answers. And that's about all I have to get us kicked off here. I'd like to introduce Nate Morrissey. He's the FAST Team Program Manager. He's an actual FAA employee. I'm just a volunteer here helping out with the FAST Team. Nate is kind of my supervisor in the FAA safety team in Long Beach. So Nate, what do you got for us?
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate the introduction and welcome everyone. It's great. We have over 260 people on this. This is fantastic. I really applaud you all for taking the time tonight to do this. It just helps the airspace, everything, local pilots, to stay safe. But a big thanks to Mike. He does a lot of these and he's one of our FAA safety team lead reps. Nate Morrissey, I'm an inspector for the Long Beach Flight Standards District Office. And I think a lot of people go, what's a FSDO? But it's basically the local FAA General Aviation Office. So I know it's a cliche, but we are here to help. Why are you laughing, Mikey? Why are you laughing?
You tell that to me all the time.
And you call a lot.
No,
anyways.
And I will back that up, actually. Nate is here to help. And I've got to say, I've worked with him for probably almost a decade now, and I really like working with Nate. He's one of the good guys in the office there. So if you got a problem, he's your man.
Well, and it's great to have Rob here. Rob's fantastic. He's like the super stud for air traffic, I think, in the nation that's always willing to go out there. But he's, actively looked how he can help instead of being told he should help. So we really appreciate it. We've done a lot of stuff together. And I'm trying to think about, like, we kind of got the band back together. I was thinking maybe like two feds and a friend or something like that. But I'm going to work on that as the night progresses. And you did say I need to do something with my white walls back here, Mike, but I hired a government contractor, interior designer, and that's what they came up with. I'm like, oh, this is nice. And they're like, yeah, it's the minimalist look. I'm like, interesting. I'm like, well, what's it supposed to look like? It's like every other government office. I'm like, fantastic. It looks great. So that's what we got going on. But
if it's like my experience with the government, they'll be there the day after you retire.
Yeah. I think without further ado, we should introduce the main man, Rob.
Okay, before we do that though, let me just see, yes, if there was a little hitch in the survey there, the question about if you're a flight instructor, that one does require an answer. If you are not an instructor, just check other down there in the bottom there. And so you can stop asking those questions in the chat and in the Q&A. We'll get that taken care of. So, all right, I'm going to close out the survey. Let's see who we got in the room. Let me share those results. So we got mostly private pilots, over half, almost 2/3 of us are private pilots. A couple of students, great. I'm always happy to see student pilots here trying to learn better this environment that we're trying to teach you how it works. And who better than the professionals right here? 2/3 of us are instrument rated or working on it. Actually, 3/4 if you include working on it. And now we got about a handful of flight instructors here. I'm going to guess most of the ones that are other there are not CFIs. So we got maybe 1/3 of us or so are CFIs. And here's your where do people operate. We got mostly San Diego. Rob, your fans are out in force tonight. And a lot in Burbank, Inland Empire, the coast sector. Great. Okay. So Rob Reddeg, tell us who you are.
Good evening, guys, and thank you, Nate and Mike. It truly has been a pleasure working with both of you guys. I think, Mike, you were one of the very first events I did, I think 5 or 6 years ago now, starting at Fullerton.
Maybe more than that.
So I really appreciate your guys' partnership through the FAST team, through the FSDO, and also your guys' friendship. It's been great to have people that we can reach out to at any point and get some answers if we need them, and just get some insight on anything going on from either side, whether it's as a pilot or from the FSDO side. To everybody else here who has joined us, wow, I mean, thank you. I'm showing 293 participants. This exceeds any brief that I've ever done. So thank you for taking the time out of your evening to share some time with us so that we can exchange some information with our partners in the airspace. If you didn't know, we'll get into how busy the Socal airspace is, the size of the airspace, some of the complications that we're facing right now, and hopefully give you guys some tips on ways to make sure that you guys accomplish what you're asking or wanting out of the system every time you go airborne. A little bit of background on me. I've been a controller at Socal TRACON now for a little over 14 years. I work in the coast area, so we'll break down the different areas in the building and how you can utilize that to your advantage to get the approaches that you're looking for or some of the services you're looking for. Prior to that, I was in the Navy for 9 years, 3 on an aircraft carrier, USS John C. Stennis, and 5.5 at NAS North Island. My current role at Socal is a controller. As much as my controller friends give me a hard time, I do work about 4 days on the floor behind the radar screens, and then the other 2 days I'm downstairs working with safety and procedures. We have some other controllers on here that I'll call on as questions arise from different areas of the building, but to make sure that we have plenty of time to get through the presentation and also answer the questions as you guys have, we want to give as much time as we can for that. I will have my contact information after this. I know everybody else here will. And after this, just know that you have partners in the airspace if you ever have any air traffic control questions or concerns with the system. So I'm going to go to share my screen, and let's just go to. Can everybody see the PowerPoint? Take it.
Yep.
All right, so we're going to get started here. So again, thank you for the time. This is a joint brief. I know I'm the NACA guy. I'm the air traffic controller tonight. I represent the union, but this is in support of the FAA managers at Socal TRACON on behalf of Dale Ralph, our current air traffic manager, and Alex Cisneros, our union president there at SCT. Again, thank you all for taking the time to be here tonight, and we look forward to exchanging information. I know a lot of people are probably going to ask, when can we do tours again? I'll go ahead and hit that right now. It really depends on COVID. As of right now, our goal is to ensure that we have bodies in the building to have a seamless operation going. We're actually pretty proud of the fact that we are the largest facility, or one of the largest facilities in the country, and we are the only one that didn't see an actual piece of our airspace shut down. Yes, some of the towers shut down because they went ATC 0. But Socal TRACON actually throughout this entire COVID process did not have a piece of their airspace shut down, which really speaks volumes to the efforts put in internally to make sure that we're there to provide you guys services. This is the facility itself. If you're not aware of the facility, is down in San Diego. We'd love to have tours. We love bringing pilots in to show you guys from our side what's going on. Unfortunately, we're limited with that right now. I will reach out to this group, Nate and Mike, and every other contact I have as soon as we can. And as soon as we can get you guys in the building, we'll definitely do that. But the biggest point about that is it is located in San Diego. If you are flying around in our airspace, if you're out of Burbank, Van Nuys, Whiteman, if you're all the way out to Palm Springs, Thermal, Bermuda Dunes, Ontario, Chino, all the way down March, we don't work March approach itself, but we definitely give aircraft to and from them, all the way down the Tijuana border, including working with the Tijuana approach control, since their airport is less than 3 miles from Brownfield down there, which is IFR separation, and we'll get into that. We also have LAX in our airspace, and San Diego, 2 of the core 30 airports. John Wayne, which is rapidly moving its way up the numbers with the amount of traffic they have. Ontario, prior to COVID, was the fastest growing passenger airport in the country. San Bernardino with Amazon warehouse there, increased operations there. We have multiple jump zones that one of them is the busiest in the world, all happening under the roof of our building. So hopefully tonight we'll be able to give you guys the picture of what we're seeing on our end, and help you guys navigate through it as safe, 1, efficient, 2. How busy are we? I definitely don't want anybody to go out there and just have somebody tell them or make assumptions of how busy we are. I'm going to give you hard numbers tonight so that you can take that home with you. We are currently at 1.43 million operations at SCT. Take a deep breath. 1.43 million operations just at SCT right now. If we continue with that for the rest of this fiscal year, we will equal pre-COVID numbers. And that is with air carrier traffic nowhere near what they were prior to COVID. So the general aviation has exploded in the airspace. It was busy before COVID, and it has grown rapidly during COVID. And those are kind of the struggles that we're seeing with the amount of GA traffic in the airspace, with the balance of staffing in the facility, not just our facility, but at the towers, and how to make the whole system work and ensure that you guys are getting as much as you possibly can out of the system every day that you go flying. 18,000 square miles of airspace. We have elevation ranges all the way from, basically out in the desert out there, all the way up to 11,500 near Palm Springs. For discussion's sake tonight, most of our airspace goes up to about 14 to 15,000 feet, with certain sections going all the way up to 17,000 feet. We're working with all the airports that have towers. We're working with whether they're FAA, contract, military towers, we're working with everybody. We're working aircraft in and out of the airports that don't have towers. So all different challenges to the airspace. 2 Class Bravos with Lindbergh and LAX, 4 Class Charlies. This is probably one of the areas that we'll discuss a lot tonight, is the airspace around a Class Charlie, since it's not as protected as a Bravo. The Tersa out there in Palm Springs. We have restricted areas, warning areas, air defense identification zones, the international border, and drop zones everywhere. At the end of the day, my message to you guys is give us a call. Our message from the facilities is give us a call. Allow us to help you through the airspace the maximum extent possible. I totally understand that there's times that you guys have asked and we were unable to do that. But I always say ask. Always give us that opportunity because it is the safest option. Air traffic control services through our airspace or anywhere else in the country is your safest option. We have the most complete picture. So we'll get into that. Socal TRACON's airspace. Each one of these areas or colors is a different area in our airspace. And this is gonna hopefully help some folks out that are struggling sometimes to find places to get approaches in because each one of these areas is staffed completely separately. So the San Diego area down to the south, the green one, they have all the airports from the Tijuana airport up to Oceanside. And they have Lindbergh, Montgomery. Montgomery has gone up. We get paid base 1 through 12. The busier the facility, the higher the number. SoCal is a 12, LAX is a 12. But just in the last year, Montgomery Airport has jumped from 7 to 9. So they're adjusting to that increase in traffic. Lindbergh has gone up to 8. John Wayne is projected to go up. San Bernardino, again, is getting busier. Ontario is getting busier. LAX is getting back to what they were before. All these airports have either got back to where they're at or they're starting to already exceed where they were at. and we're just trying to keep up. Unfortunately for us, while the GA was having training and doing all this stuff during COVID, for us, we were shut down from training. Our goal was to social distance, make sure that we had the people in the chairs and we could keep them in there as much as possible. So we shut down training, since training requires two folks to be realistically about a foot apart when you're watching a student train. So the coast airspace is mine, everything from Oceanside all the way up to Fullerton, Torrance, Long Beach, John Wayne, Los Alamitos. Those are our airports. The Empire area is the closest partners for us there, and they're Chino, Corona, El Monte, Brackett, all the way east, Ontario, San Bernardino, Palm Springs, Thermal, Bermuda Dunes. They have all those. The Burbank area to the north, the light green one, that's Burbank, Van Nuys, Whiteman. If you've ever flown around there, 3 airports all within about 5 miles of each other. And clearly we're not coordinated when they built them, but that definitely creates a special challenge for us in the airspace. The 2 in the middle, Delray and Los Angeles. Each one of these areas has roughly 30 to 40 controllers if you add trainees in there. But 2 areas in the building, so roughly 60 to 80 controllers. And their sole purpose really in life is LAX. LAX is, again, the 4th busiest passenger facility in the world prior to COVID. We expected to get right back there, if not surpass that at some point. And so that just tells you how busy. If you are flying anywhere north of Oceanside, anywhere around Santa Monica, getting into the Burbank area, you are potentially getting conflicts with LAX arrivals. And this is just why we ask that you guys give us a call. At any point, we have air carriers going in and out of Burbank, air carriers going in and out of Ontario, air carriers going in and out of John Wayne. And the airspace as designed does not contain them completely. So if you're skirting the Class Bravo airspace underneath or just to the east of it, you're putting yourself and the other aircraft in a predicament. You're putting the controllers in a tough situation if you're not talking to us, that we're having to guess that you are going to stay away, or you see that airplane, or you're not going to violate the airspace. And unfortunately for us, we don't take any chances with that, so it creates an additional workload for us. The Class Charlie out there in Ontario, same thing with John Wayne. I'll show a slide with John Wayne. The aircraft coming in and out of those airspaces are not completely contained until they descend into the altitude of the Class Charlie. So if you're just on the outside of it, or if you're just above it, we're trying to get those airplanes in. We're trying to get them out of there. But if you're conflicting with them, it just adds an additional workload to us, where if you were talking to us, we can restrict you at 45 maybe, restrict them at 4, let everybody pass safely, and then we can move everybody along. But when an aircraft's out there that's unpredictable, that just creates additional challenges for us in the airspace. Where are we at traffic count for fiscal year 22? This is the traffic count as of yesterday. The top left column says SCT, that's Socal TRACON. We did 6,143 operations in the TRACON yesterday. Sorry about that. We are always the busiest TRACON in the country. It's very rare. We have an off day every once in a while, maybe the one time of the year that we get some weather out here, that some of these other TRACONs will have higher traffic counts. But in comparison, below SCT is N90, that's New York TRACON. PCT is Potomac TRACON on the East Coast, around Washington, D.C. NCT is NorCal TRACON, so the northern half of California, the Bay Area. D10 is Dallas, A80 is Atlanta, and C90 is Chicago. So if you have any friends in those other pieces of airspace that tell you how busy and how complex their airspace is, tell them, yeah, come fly out here in SoCal with us and our partners, and we'll show you what busy really is. On the right column there, or the right boxes there, I'm going to try to move my bar down. We have the entire kind of district and all the traffic that happens in our district. I don't know if my bar is covering up your guys' screen there. Can you guys see my bar on the bottom? No, move it up there. But at the top, we're about the 5th one down there. Socal TRACON 6143 yesterday. Year to date, 1.437 million operations. If we round up, 1.438. Last year, we were at 1.177. So you can see the increase of almost 22% already this year. So we expect to see a consistent increase throughout the rest of the year. that resembled the first 9 months of the fiscal year or the 8 months. And then next year, we expect to exceed pre-COVID numbers. But if you look all the way down, you add all these towers together from Vegas. If you took the corner from Las Vegas down the Arizona border, straight across from Santa Barbara and down, just that little corner of the world so far in fiscal year, all the way at the bottom of the second column, 5.699 million operations out here in Southern California. It's impressive what we do as a team, both us and the pilots working together out here. And nobody else does what we do as a team out here. I'll be the first person to tell you that I believe the controllers at Socal TRACON are the best in the world, but I'll also be the first person to tell you that I think the pilots that fly out here are the best in the world also. The way we're able to work together as a team and navigate this airspace and do it in the safe manner that we are first, and then efficient second, just comes second to none. So kudos to everybody here. And again, thank you. It shows that everybody that showed up tonight, that you are working with us as a team to make sure that we continue to make that happen. So kind of get into some of the details here. Some of the questions that I've had come up over different pilot briefs over the last couple of years as we've incorporated ADS-B, as we have incorporated new technology. We got the next gen. A lot of people wanted to know what happened with next gen. Where did that contribute to the system? How did that help me as a pilot? ADS-B has been a game changer for us. There's no question about it. It allows us to see airplanes in places that we couldn't see them before. But from the air traffic control side, being able to see is a small part of that. Knowing what you're doing is a whole different thing. So we'll kind of get into that. We've also gone to fused radar for anybody who has gone to a radar facility years back. It's probably been 8 years now. We used to have a single sensor radar. And if you were behind that, we had one at Seal Beach. And it's a cone of confusion. So the radar goes up. If there's a mountain there, we couldn't see you. If you're directly above it, we couldn't see you. Now the system does a fusion picture, which also incorporates ADS-B, and we get an update on you every single second. With that being said, if you don't have ADS-B, if you don't have your transponder on, or if you don't have your ADS-B on, which happens every single day, we still don't know who you are and what you're doing. So what do we see behind the scopes? This upper left-hand box there, 030, if you're an aircraft flying around on a 1200 code, not talking to ATC, ADS-B or not, that is all we're going to see. All we know is that you are indicating 3,000 feet. That is not guaranteed. We don't know where you're going. We don't know what you're doing. We don't know what your call sign is. We don't know what you're going to climb to, any of that. So you're an unknown in the airspace. We're kind of guessing based on what you're doing or what that tag is indicating, how to maneuver the rest of our aircraft around you. So we just want to make sure, I think there's a misconception out there that if I have ADS-B, air traffic control can see exactly who I am and kind of what I'm doing. And there's an option to do that on our scopes. We can't do that with every single aircraft, especially every single one of them that's in the pattern at a tower. It will just clutter our scopes to a point that we will not be able to see what's going on. Now, let's just say that Mike Jess is out there flying around and he likes to depart Fullerton and climb right into the downwind at John Wayne. And he put himself maybe knowingly or unknowingly in a position to create a conflict for us. And we're trying to figure out who that is and what they're doing. We can click on the target in this upper right-hand box there, November 9151 Hotel. That will show us if the aircraft has ADS-B and what call sign has been entered into ADS-B. A lot of people think that the call sign they see in there is the exact call sign, and that's not true. You can actually change that call sign. There is like a license plate number in your ADS-B that really identifies who you are, but we only see what it is that you put into your ADS-B, so that's the only way to identify you. Some of you may have been flying around and been in the airspace monitoring a frequency wherever you're flying out of, and out of nowhere, ATC says, 9151 Hotel, are you monitoring? And all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, that's me. And you key up. And what we're trying to do at that point is get a hold of you, because you're creating some conflicts for us, maybe putting yourself or somebody else in a difficult situation. And we're just trying to get the full picture here, understand what you're doing so that we can maneuver everybody around again. Safe, one, efficient, two. Now, if you look down this bottom box, I kind of just took a screenshot off of one of our scopes. in the training lab, and to show you a combination of different things that we're looking at on the scope and how we differentiate a 1200 code, a VFR code, and an IFR code all on the screen at the same time. So if you look at this bottom box, there's the 013 up here. That aircraft is on a 1200 code, 013, 1300 foot. They're actually in the pattern at Montgomery. The one below it, November 9109 Mike, is an aircraft talking to ATC. They've told us who they are, where they're going, type aircraft. This will actually timeshare and show us the destination, the type aircraft, and then any additional information that we want to put in there. But this tag here, that 9101 Mike, below it, the 010, that's 1,000 feet. The 11 is 110 knots. We just dropped a 0 because everybody's moving a little bit faster than 10 knots. The I signifies the wake turbulence, the amount of spacing I'm required to have behind you if you are a wake turbulence producing aircraft. And then if you notice, there's that star behind the mic and the V below it. Those two things together indicate a VFR aircraft talking to ATC. So that's how we differentiate VFR1 versus, if you look down below here, here's Southwest 1101, 029, 2,900 feet. They're descending. This is the Limburg final. This is what a final looks like for us. 27, 270 knots. He's an F category, so he needs a certain space behind him. If we were trying to put one of these Skyhawks or Cherokees behind Southwest, we would need 4 miles on final. So we know based on the letter how much spacing we're required to have on final for wake turbulence. But you notice with Southwest, there's no star at the end of it, and there's no V in the gap. That's an IFR airplane. So we're constantly looking at our tags and figuring out, okay, Southwest has a certain spacing requirement. 9109 Mike has a different spacing requirement. 2160 Quebec, a different spacing requirement. So we're constantly processing that internally on what we need to do and how we need to do that so that we don't end up with any loss of separation, because that can end up being a wake turbulence situation that puts a pilot in a very difficult position. IFR versus VFR separation. I've been following some of the Facebook groups, and one of the suggestions, because of the frustrations, and we totally understand, of not being able to do a practice approach, was to go IFR. I actually would recommend not to do that. And the reason why I say that is an IFR airplane really takes a lot of the tools away from us as air traffic controllers if the weather is nice. If everybody goes IFR, the system is going to come to a halt. Every IFR airplane requires a 3-mile bubble. It's really 6 miles in the sky, 3 miles off of each side, all the way around it, 1,000 feet above and 1,000 feet below from another IFR aircraft. So as an IFR airplane, you are a massive hole in the sky. Think about 6 miles, if you're at Chino, what that looks like in the airspace, how much that extends. If you fly out of Fullerton, what's 6 miles off of Fullerton every time you take off? Then we also bring in our minimum vectoring altitudes that we have to comply with. So it really limits the tools that we have available to us to work the amount of aircraft that we want to work. So if you can go VFR to the maximum extent possible. At the end of the day, if you're talking to us, whether you're VFR or IFR, we are going to do everything we can to ensure that you make it from point A to point B. Again, 1, safe, 2, efficient. And I'll show you that. I got a radar screen that I'll pull up here and kind of give you a better understanding or way to look at that to see the kind of space that takes. We get the question a lot as controllers, how many airplanes can Rob work today versus how many airplanes can Steve, who's on here, work? And it all just depends. There's all kinds of different complexities, different airspace limitations. Some of us can maybe work 12 VFR airplanes in the same piece of airspace on the same frequency versus maybe 4 IFR in that same piece of airspace. Kind of giving you a comparison, if you were going down the final at Long Beach and I had 2 Cherokee IFRs, I'm gonna probably have them 4 miles in trail because 3 miles is my absolute minimum. And what I don't want is to go less than 3 miles because the Cherokee in the front slowed down to 80 knots and the guy behind is at 100 and I had a loss of separation. So in most situations, especially with the smaller GA aircraft, we're going to give a little bit more than the minimum required. And to be honest with you, we're doing the same with the air carriers for the air carrier pilots on here, with the goal that when they do get to the runway, that hopefully if we need to, we're getting right close to the minimum required. But I can use 2 Cherokees at 4 miles apart IFR. I could put 2 more Cherokees in the middle of it if they're VFR, and actually have 4 aircraft going down the final, all legal, giving the tower runway separation, and everybody's safe with matched speeds. So that's the different kind of flexibility it gives us. Some of you have been IFR, and you've probably seen us vector a VFR aircraft 500 feet above you, 500 feet below you. That is 100% legal for us also. So that again, instead of needing 1,000 feet separation, we're probably using 500 feet. More tools in the toolbox allows us to be a lot more efficient by aircraft being VFR. And I know it's going to come about the VFR practice approaches, and we will get into that. But that just kind of give you an idea. If you can go VFR, go VFR. We all pay a lot of money to live out here in Southern California because of the weather. Let's take advantage of it. It allows us on the air traffic control side to just have a lot more flexibility and a lot more efficiency in the airspace. So I just grabbed a snapshot of the airspace that I'm super familiar with, but this is a screenshot of the John Wayne final here, just to kind of give you a heads up of what you're looking at. On kind of the bottom left of the screen here, you see 2 parallel lines. Those are the runways. Straight out from here, you see this dashed line. That is the LDA approach. These dots covering up is the ILS, RNAV Yankee, RNAV Zulu approach. But I highlighted some of these aircraft because I talk about Class Charlie airspace, and this is what we're seeing throughout the entire airspace, whether it's Bravo Charlie, but a lot of these aircraft are not fully contained inside the Class Charlie based on whatever approaches they need. If they're visualing this Southwest over here to the right, this is an ILS approach. We're getting them from over the mountains. You see this 6,300 here. That is the minimum vectoring altitude for an IFR airplane. We are not allowed to go below 6,300 in that little chunk of airspace. And then you notice it says 5,700, then 5,200, and we can step the aircraft down while we turn them onto the final. But if you notice on this map, here's this dashed line. For those that are familiar with Class Charlie at John Wayne, that is the edge of the Class Charlie airspace. So this Alaska on the other side, who's in the downwind, who we're going to sequence in here, notice he goes outside of the Class Charlie airspace. This is 3,000 feet. All day long, we have aircraft going on the 91 freeway here, back and forth, 2,500, 3,000 feet, and probably not even aware that directly above them, directly in trail of them, we are trying to guess what that aircraft's going to do to try to get air carrier traffic, or in this picture, actually, 214 Papa, an IFR little aircraft, a GA, into the airspace. So we're trying to figure all that out with our minimum vectoring altitudes. But if I'll go to the radar screen earlier or later, and I can put a ring on one of those. But just imagine 3 miles around Alaska. But Alaska's at 4,000 feet right now. 4 Papa's at 3,000 feet. So there's that IFR separation we need. Notice who this controller turned Alaska in here onto the final and left this GA aircraft up here to the north. So it was Alaska, Southwest, and then 4 Papa went in behind them in the sequence based on speeds and what we can work in the airspace. But the big emphasis item is if you are hanging out within 2 miles of the airspace edges of any Class Charlie, even Class Delta airspaces sometimes, and you're not talking to ATC, you're not talking to the tower, you're putting everybody in a difficult position because we're guessing what you're doing. So Chino departures coming off, if there's aircraft out there maneuvering, trying to launch a jet off of Chino while there's an aircraft out there not talking to ATC is a difficult position. Our options are limited. Same thing in Limburg. We see Palomar, a lot of aircraft going up and down the coast, just outside that Palomar Class Delta airspace. If they're not talking to ATC, we're holding IFR jets because we're not going to release them into an aircraft that we're not sure what they're doing. So how do we solve that problem? Any opportunity you have to get flight following, ask for it. You can get it on the ground at almost every single airport in our airspace, whether it's from the Brownfield all the way up to Burbank, Van Nuys, Whiteman, all the way out to Palm Springs. Basically, every single towered airport will provide you a code. So when you get airborne, we know who you are, we know where you're going, you know what type aircraft you are, and all we're doing is really verifying your altitude. I'm sure it's going to come up. What if I just want to fly around and just practice? We absolutely give flight following for that to the maximum extent possible. It just depends on what's going on, but we hear that all the time. basically you can tell the tower, I want to do a local flight over downtown LA and I want VFR flight following. They will put that in as a local flight for you. You'll come off the airspace and they'll give you the appropriate frequency. So you don't have to guess at that point. Any opportunity that we have to eliminate conversations in the air, we want to do that. The airspace is incredibly complex, especially from 10 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're trying to go up and get everything you want from 10 to 4, you're really limiting your chances of getting those things, and you're guessing and hoping. We tell pilots all the time, if you really need to get something done, if tomorrow is your check ride and that's the last check ride you need to move on or get a certification, the best recommendation I can give you, nothing is 100%, get up early. As a controller, I love a 6 to 2 shift because from 6 to 9 or 10 in the morning, it's quiet. There's very few aircraft in the airspace. And that allows me to kind of relax and work my way into the day. But as a pilot, if you are trying to get something done, usually the airspace is wide open. So that's the best recommendation I can give to the pilots out there. I had one, I talked to one on the phone today who's concerned about getting their check ride here over the next couple of days. And I said, just get up early. You can almost guarantee that. The only real change to that right now is COVID staffing. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But I can promise you, as the controllers, the ones working behind the scopes, the ones on the frequencies, we are working our butts off and we are doing everything we can. At the COVID policies and all that stuff, I know there's some frustrations there, and I know it's limited services. But for us as the workers, as just the people grinding behind the scopes, we don't set policy. We just show up and follow policy. That's our job. If Rob comes down with COVID, they're going to send me home. They want to protect the rest of the workforce so that everybody is getting some sort of service, even if it's limited. Because we'd rather provide a limited service than no service at all. We've seen John Wayne when they go ATC 0. Some of you might have flown in there and listened to the CTAF or been part of that. It's definitely nowhere near as safe and as efficient as using air traffic control services when the tower is open. I'm going to move on from that. So some of the safety concerns for us is flight following. I can't preach that enough. Tonight's brief is more of a general overview of the entire airspace. I want everybody here to know if you are part of a flight, a more specific flight group at a specific airport in any piece of our airspace, send me an email after this or a text message. Emails are best, and we can set up a very specific brief to your section of the airspace that works for your group. You can send me questions and we can make sure that those get addressed in that brief. But flight following is consistent throughout our entire airspace. Again, early mornings or after sunset is your best opportunity to get whatever approaches you're looking for. I always tell people I did this brief at Fullerton, actually, the very first one I did, and gave this information. And sure as heck, the next time I work a graveyard shift, which the controllers on here will laugh because it's been a long time since I've done that. Sure as heck, somebody went up at like 1 in the morning and wanted IFR into John Wayne, Fullerton, Long Beach, and got every single approach. So I would tell you, if you can get up there before 9 o'clock in the morning, you're increasing your odds of getting what you want substantially. And that is consistent every day of the week, every day of the year. We're there. We're there 24 hours a day, 365. No matter what, we're there. But the controllers are tired right now, and I don't know if that's the right word, but we are definitely being pushed. The staffing is low. We're working overtime every single week, and we're just trying to rebound from COVID. The FAA has been hiring a lot of controllers. Actually, prior to COVID, we were on the upswing. Everybody was training and moving right along, and we were putting more controllers in the chairs and getting more certifications. And then COVID hit, and it brought us to a standstill. We're out of that. We're training now, but it's going to take some time. We've lost people during COVID that have retired, left for own personal reasons, whatever they have going on. So we're trying to replace the shortage we had before that, plus the people that we've lost during COVID. But we are slowly moving in that direction. We just picked up 8 additional controllers on this last round of hirings, I guess, from other facilities. So we are, and I ask for your patience because I know the controllers are doing everything they can to ensure that they take care of you guys. We have several pilots in our facility, so they empathize with the concerns that some have, but there's not much we can do with that stuff right now. If one of those towers are closed, all we do is deal with that as we get the information. A lot of times that when the towers go ATC 0, we're finding out as fast as you're finding out. So we're doing everything we can to handle that. We're also trying to find ways, niches maybe in the airspace where before, when we first started this and staffing went low, maybe Long Beach Tower would just come out and say, we're low staffed. We're going to cut off practice approaches completely for this period of time. And we're trying to work together as the team and say, hey, how about, can I at least give one full stop practice approach? So at least we get you one versus none. And a lot of times the towers are super flexible with those kinds of things. And then, we're at least getting you something because we definitely want to do that because we know if we don't get it for you today, that just means you're coming out tomorrow. And so the goal is to make sure that you guys get everything you can.
Hey, Rob, do you want to take a couple of questions about flight following while you're kind of fresh on the topic?
Sure.
So we got a question from Brad is asking, why can't we get VFR flight following initiated from the ground at San Bernardino, Camarillo, or Oxnard?
Great question. San Bernardino is the only, I want to say, the only tower in all of SCT's airspace that cannot do it. They do not have the equipment there. They were a contract tower until very recently, but because of their increased operations, they've now become a federal contract tower, which has opened up some funding to get them some new stuff. It's been a fight with SCT or for SCT to get them more equipment for a lot of reasons, not just the flight following side of it, but to allow the tower some more flexibility to work these heavy aircraft in and out of San Bernardino, just have better awareness, situational awareness from the tower. They definitely are behind when it comes to the technology. They have received funding, or funding has been available for them just very recently. So we are actually in the process of making that request for them to get new pieces of equipment. I would love to tell you it's going to happen tomorrow, but the reality of that is it's going to take some time. But that one specifically is the only tower in SCT's airspace that does not do it. The other two are actually part of Point Mugu approach, so they're outside of our airspace. So I'm not sure why those military facilities up there, Point Mugu, why they do not have it up there, but they are outside of our airspace, and I believe that airspace is owned by the military.
Yeah, and that Point Mugu situation is probably going to touch on another subject I'll ask you about a little bit later. But we also had a question from Jack who's asking about if you're departing a non-tower airport, like Flabob, for instance, or Redlands is an example, what's the best way to coordinate flight following from the ground there? Is that possible?
It is possible. It is a very large workload. You would have to call the 1-800 number, get the Empire area, tell them what you're doing, ask for a code. They'll have to type it in away from the position that they normally answer that phone at. And I would probably tell you, and Steve is on here, he can probably tell you, there's probably a better chance that if you called that 1-800 number, the controller's probably just going to tell you to call when you get in the air, just because of the workload that takes. And that's those non-tower airports, they're definitely an additional workload on us by not being able to do that. And you look at Redlands, especially, I mean, that is right in the downwind for 2-4 at San Bernardino. Their proximity to the other airports that we're working aircraft creates an additional challenge for us for sure.
So it's essentially the same procedure then for an IFR departure from that airport.
Correct.
You got to call the controller, get your squawk, which last time I did that was up at Cable a couple of months ago, and it was actually IMC weather, so we couldn't depart VFR And that
Yeah.
was an interesting, challenging day. Yeah. Let me see. I think we had another question about flight following. Would you prefer that an IFR aircraft, if you got an IFR flight plan on file from one of these, Steve is asking, would you prefer that aircraft depart VFR and pick up the IFR in the air?
No, and not only that direction, but vice versa. If it creates a lot of work. You take VFR, you take off VFR, and you have very reduced separation requirements for us. And the minute that we say IFR, you boom, it's like a puffer fish, and boom, you blow up, and you're this massive hole in the sky. And then if you're trying to ensure that you have IFR by a certain point, that may not line up with the airspace that's going on and the traffic going on. And then you might get frustrated because you're not getting the IFR part of the clearance or getting that extra separation when you want it, because you just don't fit in the airspace anymore. If you're trying to get off IFR and there's delays, there's delays for a reason. It just means the airspace is saturated for whatever reason. Something's going on. Could just be more IFR airplanes. It could just be so many VFR and IFR airplanes that we don't want to launch you into that. We could be dealing with an emergency. Who knows what could be going on at that time. But if you want IFR and you're filing IFR, stick with that if you can. All I can tell you is if you get airborne and you're looking for IFR, but you departed VFR, now you kind of become at our discretion on when that's going to work best for us, because you become this massive restricted piece of airspace, and vice versa. If you're coming back, if you're off of, let's just say, I don't know, I guess I'll say Palm Springs, and you're trying to land at John Wayne because it's the Marine layer time of the year, and you see that John Wayne's a call for release, and they're telling you a 30 to 40-minute delay, and you're like, well, I'm just going to go VFR and I'll go do a pop-up IFR over there. Can you do that? Is that legal? Absolutely. But if we're on a call for release to any of those airports, you see in the Burbank to Van Nuys a lot, to John Wayne a lot, there's a reason for that. And if you go in there and we have to make a hole for you, ultimately you're just delaying somebody else because maybe that was their hole.
I would have advised not doing that unless you're really sure that you can maintain VFR all the way to destination, or at least a long way down the road,
and have some time on your hands.
Sure. Yeah.
And if don't do that and put minimum gas in there, expecting to get to whatever airport that was on a call for release, and expect to just go straight in, because there's a reason it was call for release. Something's going on in the airspace, and therefore you're just creating a additional workload for everybody.
Okay, one more question I'll throw you for now, and then I'll let you continue on. This guy Anonymous, he always asks a lot of questions at a lot of webinars I'm on. Anonymous Attendee, he's asking, if you're doing flight training in the Long Beach practice area, do you prefer to get flight following or remain on the CTAF frequencies that are specified for that area?
I will tell you, I always say give air traffic the option, especially in that place. I will show you the radar screen for that. The practice area for the Long Beach practice area specifically sits directly on top of the final for Torrance Airport. And that's the beginning of the issues that it creates. The second is if you're not flying out of Long Beach and you aren't familiar with maybe Long Beach's runway 12 that day, then all the IFR aircraft trying to get into Long Beach, especially your jets, your turboprops, the final approach course goes right through the practice area. One of the things that I don't think I've touched on yet, and it's down here, the IFR routes and approaches, for all the pilots on here, whether you are IFR or VFR, if you're an instructor or not, at least at a minimum, become familiar with your local IFR procedures, or at least paths. You may not be able to fly an ILS into John Wayne, but if you look here, here's John Wayne down here. This final for John Wayne stretches roughly 15 miles out. I'm going to bring up the radar screen here shortly and show you, if this is Fullerton up here, here's Fullerton's runway on our scope. This final approach course runs about 9 miles outside of Fullerton. So think about that and now you add each airport in there. And if the final approach courses or the departure routes that are IFR, that yes, you may not be flying those, but by going out there and not talking to ATC and being out there, you're putting yourself in conflict with those aircraft. Familiarize yourself with those. And have a better idea where those airplanes are coming in and out. All that stuff's available. You don't have to be able to fly those again, but you can definitely see and understand where they're coming from. How we get into John Wayne all day long. We have aircraft come out of here and cross right through out here as all the Disney arrivals are coming into Long Beach and John Wayne. The 91 freeway, all the ones coming through here. This practice area out here, Lake Matthews, if you look at the Ontario departures trying to come out and climb up above you guys, there's so much more to the airspace than just VFR that if nothing else, start with your local airport, whichever one that is, and learn the IFR procedures or routes at least in and out of there, and at least those paths. So you just kind of have a better idea of what's going on around you. Again, just to help protect yourself and the other pilots out there so that everybody's working together and staying as safe as possible.
Okay, and I lied. One more I'll throw at you here. Richard, I know, hey, Richard, he flies out of Van Nuys. Said, would you rather want pilots flying underneath the Class Bravo airspace, especially the Los Angeles Class Bravo, to be on flight following while they're underneath that airspace?
Yes. And the reason why we say that is, if nothing else, let's just say we have a heavy aircraft coming in. If I'm talking to you, I can have you come down another 500 feet to create that separation we need. Not only are those heavy aircraft and wake turbulence, but we have what we call TCAS RAs. And for the corporate jet pilots here or the air carrier pilots here, if you're not aware what those are, there's the systems inside of these corporate jets and air carriers that basically tells the airplane it's too close to another airplane. And if we put a VFR aircraft or an aircraft we're not talking to too close to Southwest or American, and this system says they're too close to that aircraft, it'll tell them they have to climb or they have to descend. It's not an option. They're mandatory to comply with them. And the aircraft then starts doing things that controllers are not ready for. And all we get to do is monitor at that point until the pilot of those aircraft, when able, return to this altitude. Well, if you're going under the Class Bravo airspace and we get a TCAS above you as we're coming in, the TCAS is going to cause you to go up. Well, an aircraft that goes up off the final off LAX more than likely is going to end up getting above the glide path, potentially have to go around and have to go all the way back around. At LAX, when they're busy, that could be a 30-minute delay. That could be a significant delay by just going around. The Limburg approach, the final at Limburg. The final at Limburg is already one of the steepest approaches in the country. It's a short runway over there. It's the #1 go-around runway in the country for air carrier traffic. So any TCAS RA to bump one of those aircraft up because of an aircraft under the Class Bravo, they're out of there. They're going all the way around. Hopefully there's a hole for them to come back in. Yes, if you're going to go into that Class Bravo, if you're choosing not to talk to ATC, I would ask that you stay 1,000 feet out of there, underneath there at least. At least that gives us the heavy buffer for wake turbulence. And 1,000 feet is a good altitude for us that ensures pretty much every time that we're not going to get a TCAS RA.
Great. I'll return it back over to your previous program already in progress.
All right. So staffing, I think I've already touched on this. I know there's some frustrations out there with getting services. All I can tell you is the entire team at Socal TRACON, and I'll even extend that out to the towers too, that everybody's doing everything they can to work through this while COVID is still present in our community. COVID is not an excuse, but it's there. And if Rob Reddeg gets sick with COVID, I'm out. And me not being at work, or maybe two of us, and it spreads, as we know, we still have these policies that we have to follow. So sometimes reduce staffing, and then, maybe my daughter is sick at home and I got to take care of her. Sometimes, unfortunately, those things line up and we get really tight on the staffing, which has to limit some services. But I promise you that we are trying everything we can. We are ramping up training. They make us submit a report every single week of how much training we have done. And if we are not meeting the requirements that they've put on us, we have to justify that. And there's not really too many excuses on why we can't hit those numbers as required. So we are doing everything we can. For those with, you know, that are under the age of 31 or kids that are under the age of 31 that are interested, it appears that by the end of June, there's going to be a new hiring announcement put out by the FAA. So we'd love to have some of you or your kids come join us and sit next to us and be the next air traffic controllers with us. It's a phenomenal job, and you know, we're looking for some good folks that are interested in that. So I will tell you, I'll give that same commitment. If you have any questions or anybody you know that's interested in air traffic control, let us know. We can bring people into the facility, small, you know, a couple of people here and there. We're just not allowed to have large groups at this point, but we'd be more than happy to talk with you. And whether it's I can, you know, if you have a daughter and she wants to talk to a lady controller, I know Mia's on here. She would love to talk with anybody. I think that as controllers, the vast majority of us absolutely adore our job. And we love waking up every day and the opportunity to work with you guys. So, but we're working in the right direction. COVID did put a pinch on us, but I promise you that we're going to do everything we can to get back to full status. The traffic just increased way faster than anybody, I think, predicted. And we're just trying to keep up with that at this point.
Hey, Rob, I got a question for you. As far as, you know, so if, like, let's say SoCal, like, we're going to call up, ask for a practice approach into an airport, is SoCal aware of, or do they have to coordinate to see if they can handle that approach? So, you know, for example, going into Long Beach or wherever. So you call up, yep, like the practice ILS 30. Great. You guys do that, you know, hand us off the tower. The tower's like, sorry, no practice approaches. So, you know, it's just, is there anything you advise pilots doing ahead of time to stay ahead of that?
In most situations, they should be, if practice approaches are shut off, we should be including that in the ATIS at the towers, especially affected. If Long Beach is not accepting practice approaches, they should have that on their ATIS. So, and we should be telling you that prior to you going in there. So the only thing I could say is we've seen lately people calling the 1-800 number ahead of time and saying, hey, I'm getting ready to go out. Can I get approaches at Chino today? No, we can't today. But I bet if you asked, you know, what about Fullerton? There's a real chance that you're going to get it there. It's been very rare that we've had multiple areas at the same time be limited on the services. Has it happened? Yes. I mean, shoot, we had John Wayne and Long Beach go ATC 0 at the exact same time in the middle of the afternoon, I think 10 days ago, which was, in my ATC career prior to COVID, I'd never seen either one of those towers ever go ATC 0. So to see that happen, we're adjusting to. It's something new for us too. We've trained for it, but you know, I can train for a decade, but if I don't ever see it until I actually deal with it, there's been some learning curves there. But you can always ask. I can go back to that map. And I'll show you on the radar screen. Make sure you remind me. But the biggest thing I want to show you guys on the radar screen is kind of a little bit of where the boundaries are, what they actually look like in real time. So if you do take off, just have a backup plan. Don't take off and say, I can only do an approach at Chino today. I reached out to March Air Force Base representatives today, and they said you can go to March Air Force Base and do a practice approach there. You can't stay in the pattern. You can't land there, but you can at least do a practice approach there. So just another option available to you. If you can't get an approach at Long Beach, I can guarantee you, if you said, hey, okay, if I can't do Long Beach, where can I go? Torrance is available. Or if it's none of ours, we can look and see if Chino's available. Maybe even Hawthorne's available. So the good thing of all these airports being around each other is a lot of them sit in different pieces of our airspace, different staffing areas within SCT that allows the flexibility that just because one area might be short staffed that day doesn't mean that that's the end all and you can't get the approaches that you're looking for. It just means you're gonna have to be a little bit flexible and have to maybe go to a different airport. Hopefully it's close enough that it doesn't extend your flight too much. But I promise you we're trying our best.
All right, thanks, Rob.
I hit on IFR routes and approaches. Again, just familiarize yourself with your local IFR routes, departures, arrivals, at least if nothing else, just to kind of give yourself an extra awareness of what's going on. This way, at least if you are making the choice to not talk to ATC, you have a little bit of more understanding what's going on around you. Just remember, from the air traffic control side, you may have ADSB, you may see the traffic on your ADSB out the front of your window, and you may know that you are not going to conflict with that aircraft. But from the air traffic control side, if you're coming at my airplane and I'm not talking to you, I don't know any of that information. So I now have to take action. Now, when you think about taking action from the air traffic control side, think about closing speeds, even if it's just 2 Skyhawks, 200 knot closing speed. Now you start adding in larger aircraft, potentially below 10,000 feet. 2 jets is a 500 knot closure speed. So think about the distance that we're taking action to ensure that we have the separation we need. Now add to that and say, I'm trying to ensure separation with the 737, but there's an aircraft out there maneuvering that I'm not talking to. I have to build in a little extra space there because I just don't know. I don't want that TCAS RA. What is a TCAS RA? How can I maybe help people understand? We had Southwest come into our building and demonstrate a TCAS RA with a target, and what the system did, it put the 737 in a 5,000 foot per minute climb. So now I think about that and I go, man, if I'm flying into John Wayne, I'm in the downwind, and some sort of significant climb or descent like that happens with me and my daughter in the back of that airplane, it's going to scare the crap out of her. I control to prevent those to the maximum extent possible. I know the workforce as a whole does the exact same thing. How do we prevent those? It's by working as a team and having both aircraft on there. We can't prevent them all. It's 100%. We know that. But if there's anything we can do to reduce them, every opportunity we do, just to make sure that we're providing the best service that we can. So I'll go back to flight following and practice approaches. Talking to my manager, Thomas Gordon, who's on here, and he made a good point to me. He goes, if you're an instructor and you're taking your student up between 10 o'clock and 4 o'clock, it's like taking your 15-year-old child who has never driven yet and the first time behind the wheel going out during rush hour traffic. I said, man, that makes a lot of sense. So 10 to 4, it is busy out there. Assume it's going to be busy. If you're trying to get a new trainee in there or guarantee something, get out there early. Everybody on here, I'm sure, has heard the airspace, heard the transmissions. One aircraft, not their fault, but just taking a long time to get their transmissions out or needing to be repeated to multiple times. We understand that. That is our airspace. Our airspace is training airspace. But try to know your student out there, know your capabilities, your limitations, and try to time around that if you can. It's only going to help you out. It's going to help the student out, and it's going to help, us out. So I wanted to throw that in there earlier. The last thing on this slide for issues before I pull up the radar screen is the next page here. This just came out today. It is for public consumption. There is an event that is going to happen in our airspace called the Summit of Americas. You guys can Google that and look at what that is and what that looks like. But this letter to airmen will be officially out on 6/5. But they allowed us to distribute tonight to give everybody a heads up that there is going to be some significant TFRs coming to the airspace over the next couple of weeks. Just another opportunity for us to communicate with you guys, things that are going on to reduce any surprises, give you guys the opportunity to plan, be looking out for these. The last time we had some significant TFRs, we had 6 violators of those significant TFRs that ended up talking to people like Nate when it could have been prevented. Make sure that you guys are checking your NOTAMs every single day. Every single flight. I can't tell you how many times we have pilots in the airspace just the other day, Corona was closed, no TAM'd closed. And I can't tell you how many airplanes we had to try to go to Corona Airport. When we do the tour at the facility, we play a video that says, as an air traffic controller, we have to be 100% of the time. And we understand that that's the expectation out of the pilots, no matter what level of certification you are. But from the air traffic control side, we have that same expectation of the pilots. No matter what you're doing, even if you're flying from Chino to Redlands, you should not be cutting any corners, checking your NOTAMs, doing all those things. Do not get the case of get there itis. And we expect you to be 100% of the time. And if we have those two things working together, we as a team can do some things that nobody else in the world can. And we can continue to do that. So I wanted to give you guys a heads up on this. They allow us to distribute this. Expect more information to come out over the next couple of days. But just know that keep checking those NOTAMs and your TFRs out there, because there's going to be a significant impact to the airspace coming up soon. I'm going to go into, you want to ask any couple of questions there, Mike, before we move? Or Nate?
Yeah, we got a bunch. So I think
I see a lot of chats, but what about the
yeah, I think if you want to maybe wrap up what you got, then we'll start rapid firing going through the questions.
All right, so here's a radar screen. This is a replay for us. This is basically what we see on the scopes, but this was just today at noon.
We're not seeing the radar screen, Rob.
Oh, let's see here. New share. Let's see this one. Now?
That looks better.
All right.
Well, that's exciting.
So this is today at noon. I just randomly pulled up today at 12 o'clock. Here's John Wayne Airport to the middle here, right there where my cursor is. As I go further over here, here's LAX.
Hold it there. I'm looking for me. I was in there somewhere. Oh, yep, I see us.
So there's 4 runways at LAX. And I can scope all the way over here as we get into the Empire area, airspace over in here. Then you go all the way out to Palm Springs, the Tursa. And we go all the way down here to, this is the border, the water, the shoreline, all the way down to the San Diego area. But if I scope out at noon today, this is the amount of aircraft in the airspace. Every single one of them that you see a call sign is talking to ATC. So you can see how busy the area is, especially during the day. All these ones here that you see with just numbers or 3 digits, 023, 025, those are all aircraft that are not talking to ATC, or they're close enough to an airport that they are in the pattern. So here you got Chino right there, and there's a 1200 guy. I'm going to assume that that aircraft is in the pattern. Here's a 2,500 foot guy, probably Mike. That's probably who he saw on the screen. Nope. But that downwind, there's the 91 freeway right there going through here, because here's Fullerton airspace. This aircraft, as they transition here, all we're watching is this FlexJet LXJ trying to go into John Wayne. And how are they going to conflict with this guy? Is this guy going to continue eastbound? Are they going to turn around? Are they going to climb? What are they doing? Because they're not talking ATC, and they're about half mile from the airspace. Now here's an airplane. Here's Chino, and then here's this 581 Charlie Bravo IFR airplane, because they're at 6,000 feet. And I'm going to put a 3-mile ring on them. That's the amount of space that that aircraft takes up in the Empire airspace. 6,000 feet, 060 there. You notice it flashes back 060, and then it's going to show you. See there. Should show BUR, so they're going to Burbank, 170 knots. BE58 tells us type aircraft. So IFR airplane going to Burbank, type aircraft. So we kind of know their characteristics from almost all the airplanes. Some of you guys have a lot of new airplanes that are very impressive behind the scope. But this just shows you the amount of aircraft at any given time. Here's Lake Matthews over here for the people in the Inland Empire flying around in the practice area. This is an interesting one. This TTCA 41. This is an aircraft that violated something. Not sure what. I haven't looked into this yet. But this is the way we tag up an aircraft that violated something. We will follow that aircraft all the way to wherever they land. And that's when you get the lovely verbiage of possible pilot deviation. Please give us a call. Whenever we issue that information to you or that statement to you, please give us a call. We're not trying to get you in trouble. Nate, I know, is not trying to get you in trouble at the FSDO. The whole goal is to work together, exchange information, find out what happened to hopefully prevent whatever situation happened from happening again. That is always our number one goal. Educate and learn together on how we can continue to make our airspace and keep our airspace the safest and the most efficient. But one of the things I wanted to show you on this map is how this line here is a SAW line. And if you go all the way back to my other presentation, I show you the coast area, which is my airspace, versus the empire area, which is the inland empire. But here's the SAW line internally that we're looking at. This SAW line south, John Wayne, Fullerton, Long Beach, Los Alamitos, which you can do approaches at Los Alamitos also when their GCA is open. That's a whole different area of staffing than Chino, Ontario, Redlands, Flabob, Brackett, El Monte, all those ones. So if you get airborne out here in the Inland Valley and you're looking for approaches and for whatever reason they're unable to do that, you can ask them, or you can work your way over here. And more than likely our side might be able to give you that approach. Like I said, it's pretty rare lately that both areas at the same time are struggling with staffing. But it does happen. I'm not going to guarantee you're not going to see that. But it more likely than not, you're going to have an opportunity. And now if you move your way this way to the west, you got Hawthorne out here. That's a whole nother area that does approaches in the Hawthorne, which is kind of, if you look at this map, kind of like right here, north and south, is this side is 25.5, and then you go over here to 24.9 for approaches in the Hawthorne. So maybe you can get approach in the Hawthorne. So just providing you guys with information to hopefully put you in a position to get what you need.
So while you got the map right there, let me tackle two other questions in here. John is asking any airports in SoCal area where we could do PAR approaches. You just touched on GCAs at Los Alamitos. Any others?
I would have to throw that out to Steve or Mia on here. I'm not sure what approaches they have in March.
And can you talk about the hours of availability for those PARs or GCAs at Los Al?
Off the top of my head, I cannot. If whoever is asking that question, please shoot me a follow-up email after this and let me know, and I can get you more hours.
And my last understanding on that was weekday afternoons after about 1 o'clock. But if you're talking to a coast sector, 127.2, 125.35, 121.3, one of those should be able to establish the contact and get that ball going. And now you got Hawthorne on there. There was another question, I need to find it, but it was talking about trying to get an IFR approach into Hawthorne on your way home at the end of the day. Why is that so difficult sometimes?
So it's a great question. Depending on the weather, has some impact on it. But Hawthorne Airport, and what I'll do here is, let's see here. So this is an exec jet right here, or here's SkyWest going in Long Beach. I'm sorry, LAX. Remember I talked about 3 miles. 3 miles IFR separation. The LAX final, the South complex especially, is less than 3 miles from that final. So the controllers that are working the LAX final are actually putting the Hawthorne arrivals down to 1,600 feet, because this is our minimum vectoring altitude. If you look, we'll look in a little bit closer here. So 1,600 feet minimum vectoring altitude. They get this aircraft down to 1,600. The one going to the left runway, 2,600 potentially, and the one to the right complex, the north complex, we call it, at 3,600. So you have 36, 26, 16. They have to be established and on the finals before we can reduce our separation as they all three land. It's almost a trip simul situation like Atlanta has, where it almost has to be treated as though it's 3 parallel runway arrivals at the same time. So depending on the weather, what's going on, especially if it's IFR at those airports, or if there's a marine layer, which will require all the airplanes to go in their IFR unless you're ducking VFR below the marine layer. You're basically getting sequenced at Hawthorne with LAX because of the proximity of the two airports. Same thing with Santa Monica sometimes. This is another point that I talk about for Long Beach. Here's the Long Beach 3-0 arrival or departures. They're climbing right out to 3,000 feet. So if you're somebody who flies out the 91 freeway out here right around the class Delta at Long Beach, into Torrance, into Hawthorne, or you're climbing under the Class Bravo Special Flight Rules corridor, all the Long Beach departures are climbing to 3,000 and either going directly west or they're coming to the south. I can go back to earlier, the Long Beach practice area. Here's the Long Beach practice area in here. Here's your breakwater. This square here is the Queen Mary. And then this solid line is just the coastline. We have seen pictures of the jetpack, Mr. Jetpack, in the practice area. But if you notice this dashed line, that is the Torrance final. Notice where that goes through. It goes right through the practice area. So while we're trying to work aircraft into this Sling Academy at Torrance, which my understanding is now the busiest flight school in America, we're trying to work approaches in and out of there. And all we do is have aircraft going back and forth, not talking ATC in the practice area. Some of us have started using the technique of using one of the aircraft we have on frequency to go over to the practice frequency. Hey, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the practice area. Can you move to the west? You are sitting on the final. And most aircraft are usually pretty flexible with that, and we'll see them get out of there or give us a call. We can give you flight following. So same thing here. These are all the arrivals into John Wayne. And I'm using my piece of the airspace as an example tonight, only because that is the most, I'm the most familiar with that one specifically. But as I mentioned before, if you're somebody who's flying out of Chino or Ontario or the Inland Valley or San Diego area, tomorrow night for the San Diego area specifically, we're going to do a little more more specific brief with the San Diego FAST team. And I'd be more than happy to send the email for you for that if you are part of the San Diego area and you want to look into that. But here's Palomar up here and all their airspace. But you can just see, here's Miramar. Look at how far out that extension of their final is down here. You got North Island. Oh, North Island, we're too far there. But here's Montgomery Airport. Here's Miramar Airport. We actually have to sequence the two airports for IFR departures, because if you look at how close they are, because they're less than 3 miles. Lindbergh and the military base, North Island, we actually sequence those airports for departures because they're less than 3 miles. Keep going south to the Tijuana border right here. Here's Brown Field, here's Tijuana. If I put a 3-mile ring around this aircraft, 3 miles from that airport. So that's the limitations that IFR puts on us. Where if you're VFR, we have a lot more flexibility in the airspace.
All right, I think it's time for rapid fire round. What do you think, Mike?
Let's go.
Y'all ready for this? You ready to copy? There's some.
Yeah, we got 29 questions, so I'm going to try to keep the cadence going. All right. First one, has the TRACON had any input on the proposed San Diego practice areas that are proposed for charting or charterware?
From my knowledge, no.
Can I share a website on this subject?
Are you seeing my screen now? My regular
yes.
screen? Okay.
Yes.
Just gonna go back to the PowerPoint.
I was gonna give a quick plug for SCOG, if I might. So here's the SCOG website. This is the Southern California Airspace Users Working Group. And this is an airspace group that was formed a long time ago that deals with has a tremendous amount of information on airports in all of Southern California. This group, the people who are involved with that practice area issue down in San Diego are part of this group. And so we're at least tangentially responsible or involved in it. So there is some information, some involvement. They also have information on hotspots. If you are concerned about practice areas in the LA area, the San Diego area, a lot of really good information on hotspots in here. There are a couple of different presentations that you can download. Here's one that discusses a lot of these hotspots and what it is about that region for your practice maneuvering that makes it a hotspot. Somebody asked about minimum vectoring altitude charts. I posted this link in one of the Q&A there. If you're interested in what an MVA chart looks like, here's all the MVA charts for the country. So that's down there. And let me think, I was looking for something else a moment ago, but I wanted to mostly just push that SCOG site as a good place to go for information for operating in and out of the areas here. And it's just scaUWG.org. And you can have it back.
Mike, do you mind posting that in the chat?
I can do that.
Okay. Let's see. Another question about San Diego, Rob. I'm eager to see what programs may be in place to educate airmen operating north of the San Diego Bravo near Carlsbad. As an operator out of Carlsbad, we see a steady amount of traffic conflicts from our perspective with RA. So I would say join your chat tomorrow night. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to get a little more specific into the San Diego area. Palomar, we know that there's a lot of conflicts on the departure end and also on the arrival end of Palomar. SCON, the final approach fix there is at, I want to say 3,400 feet. Everybody loves to transition the 15 freeway north and south, which basically is T-boned with that final approach fix. All legal, 3,000 feet and below. Not talking ATC, outside class Bravo, outside class Delta, outside class Charlies, all 100% legal, but also in direct conflict with the IFR aircraft or VFR aircraft doing practice approaches into Palomar Airport.
Okay, question on a circle to land approach. Can you ask for an alternate missed approach procedure, or do you have to fly the published missed? Now that's kind of loaded, but you have to fly the published missed. You know,
yeah,
but and you
so
ask.
That's up to the towers and what's going on and what we have going on and what we've kind of restricted them to. Every airport has a little bit different stuff. I will tell you this: if you are IFR and you're looking for multiple IFR approaches, make sure that you give us, you make that request, and whatever the answer is to that, make sure that you comply, please. And the reason why I say that is because if you come off IFR on a missed approach because you want to play a pilot and command game, that's great. But if you go around and we did not expect it, we have to figure out what happened. And you become, you've stopped the departures at that airport because more than likely, if we're telling you to full stop, we have other traffic that we're trying to get out. So you're really just penalizing your other fellow aviators. But two, I need to know, is there something on the runway? Is there something wrong with your aircraft? Is there low-level wind shear alert? Is there something that impacted you from landing that I need to know because aircraft B is directly in trail of you and I don't know what happened, so I have to get that information. So please, if you ask for an IFR miss and they say unable full stop, then please just land. Their other option is you as a pilot can say, I will cancel IFR and go VFR if the weather permits. And more than likely, we'll let you continue and do a VFR. You can fly the exact missed approach that you were trying to do, but do it VFR, which again opens up the options for us in the toolbox. But you will no longer see, especially in the San Diego area, the towers ever soliciting you to cancel IFR. They will tell you cleared to land. If we didn't already issue the missed approaches because we expected that, and then it will be up to you to say, I want to cancel, because we are not supposed to be soliciting at that point. That's a fairly new change to how we operate.
Got it. And then, Rob, would you, we got 26 questions in the Q&A and then multiple in the chat. Steve's doing a good job. And maybe we should introduce real quick, the other controllers on board. So, and SET staff, so people are like, who's Steve and me and Brad?
Pull back that curtain a little bit and see who else we got on the team here.
So without knowing, I know Steve, I've seen Steve responding. I haven't got in on the chat too much there. But Steve Leffler is a controller in the Empire area. He's also a pilot. He's also the procedures lead for them. So you see him responding. Mia Bauer on the list there. She's also a controller in the Empire area, also a pilot. Brad Wilco is a controller in the Del Rey departure area of the building. He's also a certified pilot.
And I gotta say, Brad Wilco has got the perfect name to be an air
I
traffic
was,
controller.
you stole my thunder. Stole my thunder.
Don't get him talking. We'll be here all night. And then Alex Cisneros is on there too, and he is he's a controller for the arrival area going into LAX, and he's also our local union president. So
awesome.
They're all at least listening. I'm not sure what they're up to be able to respond, but they're definitely there.
Okay, well, Mia, Steve, Brad, Alex, feel free in the Q&A, because I think you're panelists, if you want to start on some of these questions, answering it in the chat, and we'll keep going down the list. So Rob, can you touch quickly, how is ADS-B used for air traffic?
So ADS-B feeds into our radar system. So, and ultimately the old school radar, we used to get an update every 7 seconds, I think it was, single sensor, you'd see the antenna spinning. Now the system takes all the radars plus ADS-B and puts it into one system. And really what that has allowed us to do is see airplanes in places that we couldn't see them before. It's allowed us to see them lower to the ground. For instance, in my area, we were working off the radar antenna that's at Los Alamitos. So my radar screen was limited on what I can see back at Lake Matthews or down even below Dana Point if you're below like 2,000 feet because of that line of sight of that radar. Where now the system takes that radar, it takes the radar at Camp Pendleton, it takes the ADS-B, it takes the 2 radars at LAX, and it puts it all into one system that allows us to see planes in places that we never could see them before. The unfortunate side is that the ADS-B does not allow us to communicate any better than what we could do before. So we still work on line of sight frequencies, antennas, but we, as far as the radar reception and what we can see of the aircraft in the sky, ADS-B is contributing to that significantly. Awesome. So it's great.
Okay, next one. Great question about Disney TFR. In the past, at pilot controller meetings, we were talking to, people were saying if you talk to Socal, that was enough to transition the Disney TFR. Something's changed. Now we're directed to fly around or over the TFR. When I ask to transition Disney, it's denied. I typically need to cross the TFR to Chino to Catalina at 3,000.
Yes, if the only rule for us, to go through the Disney TFR is you have to be departing basically from Fullerton, Los Alamitos, or John Wayne. Long Beach, sometimes if we need to put you through that for traffic, we're allowed to do that. But ultimately, if you're not departing or arriving one of those airports that requires us basically to have to transition that TFR, you are not supposed to go in there. Unless you hear the words, that you're allowed to go through there, or that you work at one or come in and out of one of those airports, you have to stay out of there. They've not super recently, but a little while ago, probably when you saw that change, they've kind of cracked down on us. A helicopter flew through there, YouTubed the whole thing, posted it all over the place, and got us all in trouble.
Yep, during COVID. Okay, so just to verify, if you're on flight following though, regardless if you're on flight following, you need to stay clear of the TFR unless, unless you're being on a heading.
Correct. Unless the ATC is putting you in there. Okay,
sounds good. All right. Do you have any numbers for ops and military fields? I fly out of North Island.
Off the top of my head, no, they do not contribute to that list, but I think we can get it. I'm sure if we wanted to. For some reason, they don't contribute to those numbers off the top of our head.
Got it. Okay. Does TRACON have LOAs with Charlie and Delta airports in the area to allow me to transit their airspace? So as long as I'm on with you, or do I need to switch to their tower for the clearance? And this was one question Mike and I were talking about that I think all of us wonder. If we're on flight following, do we need to call the towers?
So by definition, if you're talking to ATC, no. Is there controllers that might give you a hard time if all of a sudden? Yes, I'm not going to lie to you, but legality, let's just say you were coming from Chino and you're landing at Long Beach, and I tell you altitude at your discretion, and you descend through Fullerton's Class Delta airspace, it is the air traffic controller's responsibility to coordinate that. Now, I would ask, if you are going to do that, either just stay out of Fullerton's airspace. If you don't need to go through somebody else's airspace, don't. If you need to, or you're hoping to, let us know. We get that all the time in my airspace. Guys taking off of Long Beach and they want to go eastbound to Chino, and they say, can I transition Fullerton's Class Delta? Depending on how busy I am, I may say yes, and I'll coordinate behind the scenes. And if I'm not busy, or if I'm super busy, I'll say unable to remain outside, because it requires me to call them on the line. One of the things that I know, pilots are wondering, what are those guys doing? It's quiet on the frequency. Everything that we have going on the frequency is going into one ear. So whether I have one frequency or two frequencies or three frequencies or four frequencies, on the mid shift, we have six frequencies. But all the pilots are going into one ear. Not only are the pilots, but if the towers are calling us, that's going into that same ear. If Steve Leffler or Mia Bauer or Alex calls me over the line, it's going into that same ear. So there's constant things going on into one ear where people are stepping on each other all the time, and we're trying to balance that out. And then on the other side, you have people in the actual radar room talking to you about whatever's going on in the airspace. You have your supervisor, maybe another controller's coordinating to go through your airspace. There's a myriad of reasons that we may not hear you, we may not have gotten what you said right off the bat. No different than you guys, the lovely term blocked, which we just, we adore that word. So give us a little patience. If always key up the frequency and listen first before you start talking. Figure out what's going on. If you're on flight following and I switch you to 25.5 and you get over there and the frequency is just overloaded, just be patient. The controller sees you. They know who you are. They know where you're going. They know what you're doing. They'll reach out to you if they need to right off the bat. But be patient with them. Don't keep trying to key up to get in there right off the bat, especially if you're already getting flight following, unless obviously there's an emergency or something like that going on. But they see you. They know what you're doing, and they can get a hold of you if they need to at that time.
Okay, cool. Now getting back to the practice approaches real quick, are you finding that most towers, will they put on the ATIS that practice approaches are not allowed?
It could be something that we definitely take back from this, that we make sure that whatever area, whether it's their decision or our decision, whatever it is, that we're communicating that to the maximum extent possible.
Yeah, I think that'd be good for all of us, the flight standards, and all of us try to run it up, because it's hard to tell. And I think sometimes they're not allowing approaches, no in particular tower, but then it's like, crap, SoCal doesn't know, or maybe you guys do know, but yeah, we need to figure out the communication on our side. So, okay, great.
And on the other side of that, though, there's a lot of times that we've seen lately that the towers just out of nowhere, because they're just saturated in their traffic pattern, will call us and say, hey, no more practice approaches. And that may only be for that 30-minute window that you were looking for one while the tower pattern calms down. But that's not going to go on the ATIS. But if the coast area knows that we are reduced staffing for the entire 8-hour period, and we know that we're not going to be able to provide that service for that extended period, then I think we can definitely do a better job of communicating with the towers and asking them to advertise that also, so everybody's on the same page, just so it reduces any confusion.
Regarding your request for flying VFR when possible, when approaching SoCal from the north on an IFR flight plan for landing in the San Diego area, should we just tell center that we could accept change to VFR? I'm assuming VFR with flight following possibly, but
canceling, if you can go VFR, regardless of the situation it is, whether you're a smaller aircraft, larger aircraft, whatever the scenario is, if you can go VFR versus IFR, that helps. That is beneficial to ATC. And it might be the difference of you getting a more direct route to where you're going, because it allows us some more flexibility.
All right. Why do helicopter pilots not use flight following?
In most situations, they're so low, they're not even conflicting with the aircraft, the fixed wing aircraft in the airspace. So they have their own helicopter routes down low. A lot of times they're just bouncing from class Delta to class Delta. Obviously along the coastline, they love to fly there, but typically they're below 1,000 feet that we see most of the time, maybe below 1,500 feet. And that's just usually lower than most of our aircraft, unless they're on final and already entering in the class Delta airspace. So I think that's why they don't do it.
All right. What is the recommended route to file for round robin IFR flight plan with only takeoff and landing at the original airport and only approaches at those airports? For example, John Wayne, or
at the end of the day, an IFR flight plan was designed to go from point A to point B. That's what they're for. You can put in the remarks that you're requesting multiple IFRs, but I would tell you that when you take off, expect to land. If as soon as you get airborne, we see this all the time at Long Beach, IFR off of Long Beach, it just wants to go back to Long Beach. And if they get airborne, they'll ask us, can I get an IFR missed? And we'll say approved or unable. And if it's unable, then they either land or they cancel IFR with the tower and they fly the published VFR missed or alternate instructions issued by the tower. But ultimately, a flight plan is point A to point B. Even if that point A is right back to point B, it's the same spot. That's the design of an IFR flight plan. And anything above that is just additional services being provided.
Okay, got it. Let's see. Regarding flight following in the CME practice area, about 15-20 miles west of Burbank, often find that SoCal is too busy to take VFR traffic in this area. Again, I think that's just workload permitting, correct?
Workload permitting, experience always comes in there also. You just never know. You could have we just certified a new controller fully certified in our area, and he just got the final at John Wayne. What he can handle versus what some of the other controllers have been there for, a decade, they're different. And so, I just know that everybody's doing their best and they're trying as much as they can to provide as much services as, the best services they possibly can while ensuring that highest level of safety, number one.
Okay, Rob, I'm flying from William Fox Field to Long Beach and Joshua switches me to SoCal on 24/6. I let them know I have the current ATIS and asked to put the ILS on request. The controller tells me that I need to make the request with a third controller down the line. Would it be a little bit more efficient to know what approach an aircraft wants to do beforehand to be able to sequence them, others in the airspace accordingly? I usually end up making the request with 27.2 or even 25.35 being the final frequencies for LGB.
Correct. In a lot of situations, like if you look at Long Beach, since that's the airport in question, the ILS, the RNAV Yankee, and the RNAV Zulu are exact same final approach course. So we're vectoring the exact same spot. The ILS is the advertised approach. So if the ILS is the advertised approach, the minute you tell us that you have information alpha, we're assuming that you're going to take the ILS approach unless you request something different than that. So we're actually going to set you up for the approach that's advertised. So yes, and what's going on there is the area within SCT that works the final airport that you're going to. So for me, that's coast area for Long Beach. Mia and Steve, who are working in the Empire area, they're not responsible for ensuring that you have the ATIS. It's the area that the airport is in of intended landing. That's the area that's responsible. It's not fair for you guys to have to know that. Those are some of the weeds of the internal workings of SCT. Please don't get frustrated if you have to say, yes, I have alphas twice or 3 times. I apologize for that. It's just unfortunately the complexity of the airspace, and without you getting super into the weeds about how it works internally, it's just not worth. Just say you got alpha again, please.
Okay, right.
Rob, could you throw up the diagram of where the sector boundaries are, where the Empire sector, Burbank sector, Coast sector are? That might help clarify a little bit. Well, I'll need to ask the next question.
So, looking at this map here, if you're coming in from the northeast to Long Beach, you're going to come over here, Victor 363 or Victor 394, kind of come down here near Fullerton. And then once you cross this line, this is going to be 21.3 if we're fully opened, or 25.35, depending on the combination of frequencies. That is where you'll need it for Long Beach, Fullerton, John Wayne. If you're coming in from the north, you're going to come down here at 7,000 feet. When you get to 27.2 or 25.35, that's when you're going to need it there. 35.4, 25.5, they're constantly combined up based on staffing, basing on workload. So it just depends on where you're coming from, what airport you're going to. But if you're really, really familiar with the airspace and you know the frequencies that work the airports that you're arriving at, then you'll get it down. But
yeah, that's kind of the thing. But earlier you had a diagram that it wasn't this radar scope. It was another diagram. They showed Empire sector, coast sector, and that's really if you're landing at Long Beach and you're departing somewhere to the east in the Empire sector, you're talking to an Empire sector controller. That if he doesn't always get the word across accurately to a coast sector approach controller, and the coast controller is the one who wants to know that you've got the ATIS, what your approach request is, and so forth.
Correct.
For example, and same thing if you're going down to San Diego from my base, say Fullerton, the coast controller I talked to coming off the ground, 12535, doesn't know or care what my approach request is going to be 45 minutes down the road or half hour down the road in San Diego.
Correct.
But when I get to 127.3, that's the guy who does want to know.
And internally in the building, the Empire controllers are on a different aisle on the other side than me. So I can't even yell at them and say, hey, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 has alpha. It would require me to go onto the landline and get into their ear and interrupt a transmission or take up time on their frequency from providing services. So we try not to do that to the maximum extent possible. So I apologize that you're going to be asked maybe once or twice at least for the information, and please don't be frustrated. Just, yep, I got alpha.
Even taxiing out for takeoff, we copy the ATIS from the tie down area. We say, hey, we're on the southwest parking taxi for takeoff with Romeo. And what's the first thing the ground controller says? Advise you have Romeo.
All day.
They're just double checking, Mike. They're just double checking.
That's just the way it is. It's hilarious.
All right, next question.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to get through these. Coming southbound, I was cleared through Miramar Bravo into Gillespie. I was also asked to stay clear of FOSS class Delta. I didn't know, so I asked ATC reply above 3000. Question is there a default class Delta underlying a Bravo that's not on the VFR charts?
Not that I'm aware of.
If there's a Delta, it's on the chart.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Miramar class Bravo is an interesting one because it's actually Miramar and Lindbergh in one class Bravo, which my understanding, it's the only situation like that in the country.
I could put that chart up if you want.
All right. While you're working on that, would you want a plane such as a traffic watch plane, which flies at 2,200 feet to speak to you and avoid the towers?
I mean, it just depends on where you're at. But if you're getting close to a class Delta and you're just hanging out, I would say either talking to the tower or talking to us, talking to one of them, because one of us is trying to get airplanes in or out of there. And if you're not talking to both of us, we're trying to just maneuver around you. So, I always say, give ATC the opportunity. There's been times where, we'll just say, you're good, and just monitor the frequency. At least I know you're there if I need you. So different techniques on that. But I always say, if you got the opportunity to ask, let the controllers make the decision on what they think they need is best for that safety situation, and then go from there.
Okay. Are the controller charts showing the final approach course published anywhere? Seems like it would be a useful resource for pilots to look at.
No, and that's why all I can tell you is whether you're VFR or IFR certified, at least familiarize yourself with the your local procedures, if nothing else, the approaches coming in and out, and where they're coming from, and the altitudes that they're going to be at. because there isn't one out there, and they're changing. They change all the time. I hate to say all the time, but we've added new ones. They have different, the RNAV Zulus, especially into LAX, into John Wayne, into Lindbergh. They're all different, and the things are changing pretty quick on us, and we're just trying to keep up.
Yeah, so here's the San Diego TAC chart with the Miramar Class Bravo surface section right here. San Diego, Lindbergh surface area here. But we got the deltas over here at Montgomery and Gillespie. So, I mean, there's no deltas up here to the north. There's non-tower. You got Palomar over here.
Yeah.
You've got Ramona right here. So, I mean, there's no hidden class delta there.
Correct.
So.
Okay. Let's see. June gloom makes perfect weather to get in approaches and actual. If you want to file and go up to fly multiple approaches, going missed after breaking out, coming back around for another approach, what is the best way or time to do that?
The mornings or later on in the evenings. If
should they put any comments like when they file? It's like looking for multiple approaches, or
I don't think so, because ultimately it's just going to be, once you get airborne, make that request. As soon as you get with the approach control, hey, I'm let's just say you're going IFR from Brackett to Chino. Hey, I'm requesting an IFR missed off of Chino to El Mate. The controllers at that time are going to tell you, expect that or expect a full stop based on each individual situation at that time of what's going on. So in most situations, if you filed a flight plan and the airport is from point A to point B, all internally to SCT, we're not even seeing those flight strips come to our sectors.
Okay. Do I have to say my altitude when telling a tower controller my current position when inbound?
I would say, unless they're trying to radar identify you, technically no. I mean, that's only really a requirement for us to radar identify you to make sure, or to verify your mode C is accurate. We don't even need it to radar ID you, but we're verifying your mode C. But if a tower you're coming in, I'm thinking back to my tower days, which is a long time ago now. A VFR aircraft checks in. Hey, if I don't have any traffic for you, I really don't care what altitude you're at. Just make a left base to 29 at North Island, and I don't care. But if I have traffic, I'll say, hey, what altitude you're at, or maintain above or below for traffic. But other than that, I don't think you're required to.
Okay.
Mia's got her hand up here, by the way. Our panelist, Mia. You want to come?
Go for it, Mia.
Hey,
Yeah.
sorry, my camera's not working. I just wanted to go back to the practice IFR approaches. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep. I'm just gonna get some water.
So I'm Mia from the Empire area. I know there's a lot of people that are trying to do their practice approaches in the Empire area, because you can do so much in such a little bit of time. But there are some weird things about the Empire missed approaches that are not typical of some other areas. First of all, if you're going to Chino, Riverside, Corona, the missed approach points are pretty much the same or conflict with all other approaches. So you shut down the approaches for the next guys behind you. Anytime you're planning on doing a missed approach, we really need to know that so that I can protect the guy behind you. And I can't say no to a missed approach, but you can certainly maybe get an answer, something like, oh, if you want to do a full stop, you can get you in number 1, or you can do the planned missed approach and be number 5, but you might not get your request right away. It really affects a lot of other people. El Monte is a weird one because the missed approach IFR goes right into Los Angeles. And so we really can't facilitate practice missed approaches in El Monte. It's really not feasible. They'd have to build a giant hole for you in LA for you to go in El Monte. So what we usually try to do when somebody asks, hey, I need a missed approach here, is give you an equivalent type of an approach. If you want a VOR Alpha approach, Bracket's right next door. We can do that, no problem. So to facilitate your request, a lot of times we just need you to be flexible. If you want to do a procedure turn over CASB, VFR works sometimes, IFR hardly ever does. I know there's someone on here was trying to do that and not getting it IFR. You gotta kind of verbalize with us how much you need. If it's for an actual check flight, a lot of times we'll really try to work hard to make that work if we can, versus I just want to do a procedure turn. Well, there's lots of other procedure turns. There's one over bracket. There's one for non-precision approaches. So help us help you get what you need done in a way that with you being flexible, we can also be flexible as well. The El Monte approach IFR is one that I really don't have a lot of power to be flexible with. So I just wanted to mention that. If you have to go missed approach at El Monte, there needs to be a reason. Unstable approach, dog on the runway, something. If you're sitting there, we really would rather you went somewhere else, because it really impacts a lot of other people, and that's not necessarily something that everybody would know. So
and I'll add that I've had really good luck the last couple of weeks getting the procedure turn on the VOR Alpha approach into Fullerton. It has been available almost every time I've asked for it in the last few weeks or so.
We have a lot of procedure turns in the Empire airspace. There's just a couple that can get tricky. CASB is one of them, because it blocks the March departures as well. So we have to protect for their airspace. And if you're going more than 120 knots, it starts conflicting with the Ontario routes. So anyway, flexibility helps. And I try, if you have another option available, like Rob said earlier, I need this VOR approach. Oh, I got 5 VOR approaches. Which one would you like today?
Pick one.
If Chino, 2 days ago, they closed one of their runways. It was NOTAM closed, but that was their reason for shutting off practice approaches. That had nothing to do with SoCal. They just called us and said, hey, we're down a runway. So if you see something like that, you can maybe estimate, oh, okay, might not get practice approaches into Chino, but Riverside's right next door. There is a procedure turn in lieu of hold for Riverside ILS as well, for the person who is wanting the procedure turn really bad at CASB. We might be able to do Riverside instead. So anyway, watch out for El Monte. Don't do missed approaches there.
Thanks, Mia. Appreciate it. Okay, I'm familiar with Burbank areas VFR missed. Do other areas have that option? I think a lot of airports.
Yeah, I think they all have a VFR missed of some sort. We have a lot of options when you go VFR. There's no vectoring below the MVA requirements when you go VFR missed. So the tower, literally based on whatever agreements we have or their traffic pattern, can give you anything that they want. So if you're VFR, the flexibility to do stuff with you is just increased substantially. So just ask, say, hey, I'm IFR, I want to cancel VFR and go missed. I request a right turnout or a left turnout, and based on traffic, based on what's going on, they all have a lot of different flexibilities, but definitely opens up the options for them.
Okay. Sometimes when I request a practice approach into, say, John Wayne, the controller may ask if I can keep my speed up 120, 130 knots, which I'm more than happy to do. Is there a way to relay this information in advance so we don't get rejected because we're a 182?
I would just tell you John Wayne, we try our best. If we're not going to give you a practice approach into John Wayne, it's just because whatever demand is getting ready to happen on the John Wayne is all jets and all turboprops, and you're probably going to get delayed. You can always tell us, hey, I can maintain 130 knots. All right, that helps me. Depending on what's going on, but if I'm getting ready to get hammered at John Wayne with a bunch of jets, 130 knots, that doesn't help me in the downwind. That may help me once you're inside of the final marker, but in the downwind, when I need to get you into the down, get you turn base, get you turn on the final, it doesn't really help me there, because I'm not really supposed to be assigning air carriers anything less than really about 170 knots. Some of them will do 150 for you, but you're still slower than what's going on in the pattern until you're inside the marker. I can get them all the way back to approach speed, but the last thing I want as a controller is Mike there in an Airbus 319, his olden days 319s, 320, whatever he was doing.
737, please.
Oh, my fault. No offense.
Actually, Rob, that was Mike's question. That's just his alias on these.
But yeah, last thing I want is an air carrier during a push back to approach speed at a 10 or 15 mile final, because that just backs everything up further.
I've been there. I've been 30 flaps on a 10-mile file into LAX.
Yeah.
It's hanging on the stick shaker almost.
Okay, so we got a hot topic here. Well, kind of. Limitations on equipment for special flight rules area. The flyover chart. I think Mike wants to take this one because he's got a good story about it. Go.
I do have a good story of it. I hate the special flight rules area. I do not use it. If there's any other way to get over LAX, I take it. And the reason is the very first time I was using that CFRA, I was flying northbound. I don't know where I was going. I was in my 182 and I'm following all the rules. I'm on this radial. I'm at this airspeed indicating about 130 knots. I'm talking on the CTAF. I'm squawking 1201. I'm following all the rules. I get passed up by a Cessna Citation like I'm standing still. And so, okay, no turbojets, 140 knot max, talk on the CTAF. He wasn't doing any of those things. And it just occurred to me that this is the wild, wild west. It's unsafe on that thing, in my opinion. I would much rather be on one of the Class Bravo transition routes where you are inside Bravo airspace, you're talking to a controller, and they are helping you maintain separation. So the question that this guy, Anonymous Attendee, asks again is, so propeller aircraft, no turbojet, 140 knots. A TBM, I've flown a TBM once. It's been a long time. I'm not that familiar. I think they can do 140 knots. It's probably kind of slow for them. There's no limitation. I think you're fine. It's not a turbojet, but you got to slow down and you got to talk and you got to squawk and you got to do this and that. And I'd rather be on an IFR flight plan, or I'd rather be on one of the what are the higher altitude ones? The
Coast or something?
Coastal route or one of those. Yeah.
For sure. I agree with that. You know, it's like, I mean, just from a safety standpoint, I mean, you can have a decathlon or a 150, a student pilot on a solo. It's like, in my opinion only, Nate, not FAA Nate, TBM has no business being in a special flight rules area. You're just too fast and it's too dangerous for you and the people that are in it, you know, so.
Yeah, and this is one of my favorite questions for flight reviews is it ever okay to be in Class Bravo airspace without having received a Class Bravo clearance from a controller? And most people will say no. And the answer is yes, there is one case, and that's it. That's that CFRA route. You are inside the Bravo airspace without even talking to a controller, let alone having a clearance into the Bravo from a controller.
And to add to that, you know, if you're getting flight following from us, say you're coming from San Diego area, and then you say, oh, I want the special flight rules corridor. So then we terminate you, and then you go to 1201, and then you go over to and then on the north side, you're like, well, what's the frequency on the north side? And so now the whole conversation of re-identifying you has to happen again on the north side because we terminate that tag. So you're on a 1200 code or 1201 code, hopefully. I'll say my opinion is special flight rule corridor, but I think it's more in line with what Mike is talking about. And I saw somebody put in there, you know, the coastal route is great for us. It works great. You're getting flight fun the whole time. If we need to move it, if we need to move you left, right, up, down, whatever's going on, we can do that because we're in contact with you. Yes, you're supposed to follow that route, but it just gives us the flexibility. If we need to turn you off of that route for safety, we'll do that. It's constant contact with ATC. It's in a real good spot overall. And again, if we need anything from you, we have you there to help and just allow us.
In the chat, Rob, somebody had asked earlier, why are separation services often not provided or canceled prior to the final approach when an IFR approach is requested by GA aircraft? And they say training is hard enough without a mid-air collision, but I think they're talking about possibly a practice approach.
Yeah, so when we say VFR practice approach, no separation services provided, it's because I can put you, I only, when you're VFR, unless there's wake turbulence involved, I only need runway separation versus two Skyhawks that are IFR going into Long Beach. I need a minimum of 3 miles. Now, if I have a VFR one, I'll put the VFR one right in the middle and I'll say no separation services provided. You're not getting IFR separation. When you're IFR, you're only getting IFR separation from another IFR aircraft. We can do the VFR, it gives us some more flexibility, and we're just dealing with runway separation. So it's basically just letting you know that for an approach, you're potentially closer to the other aircraft than you might think you are because you're not IFR.
Okay, so how does it get different when the pilot requests or you clear them for a visual approach?
When you're IFR, if you're on an IFR visual approach, it's the same as you being IFR on an ILS approach from another IFR airplane. But obviously, if you're on a visual approach IFR, you're on your own navigation, unless we kind of gave you some instructions on how we want you to fly that. But as far as from another IFR airplane, we, maybe Southwest going into, I'm just going to use Long Beach again, but maybe Cessna 12345 was number one out there IFR, and we got Southwest coming behind. Even though he's on a visual, by the time the first aircraft that's IFR lands, I cannot be less than 3 miles, even though he's on a visual approach.
Can you throw that radar display back up on the shared screen again? Somebody wants to grab a screenshot of it. Myself included. I think that's really cool. I wish I could see that.
Can you guys see it right now?
Not yet.
Okay. Share screen.
Then, Mike, I'm just going to go through the chat, make sure we didn't miss anyone.
We probably did, and I'll just say, obviously, you people watching it live, you should be getting a recap email tomorrow. I'm going to download this recording and save it and process it and put it on my YouTube page. And you should be getting an email probably tomorrow, or it might be Friday, with a link to watch the recording. So if you were on a phone and couldn't see the visuals, we'll have that for you in a couple of days.
Okay, so quick or recap for Rob and everybody. Well, just for practice approaches, it seems stuff by the coast is tough lately. But I mean, what airports do you suggest that you've seen the least amount of delays or?
That's a tough question to answer. All I can tell you is, as Mia mentioned earlier, also is just be flexible. Don't just have a plan to go to one airport for that flight. Look at the other ones that are close by, because a lot of times there's one somewhat close by that you could probably get into in those situations. So have some flexibility up there, and if we tell you unable at one, what airport's available? I understand that means you might have to look up the charts in your plane and it'll take a little longer, but most times than not, you can find a place somewhere around that you can get into some way, shape, or form.
I tell people too, Google the control tower, Google the phone number, so that you can call. Like if you don't hear it on the ATIS, like just call them real quick. It's like, hey, are you guys allowing practice approaches? Yeah, we're good. Okay, sweet. Then go from there.
For people, wondering what that number is, it's the same number that you would call, as mentioned earlier, for an IFR clearance when the tower is closed. That we get those phone calls now. So, just know that when you're making that phone call, it's coming directly into the radar room. So we can't have everybody calling every single time. But the towers usually can answer the question for you, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, I was saying call the tower to see if they're doing it. I wasn't saying call SET.
Oops.
Yeah.
You can figure that one out already on this.
Yeah.
That's what I was saying. Google the towers, but okay, we got another question. What are the most common errors seen within the SET area? For someone who is a CFI and teaching students, is there something controller specific that you'd like us to teach about?
Flight following. Trust the air traffic controllers, that the air traffic controllers are your friends. Just be ready. Again, as an instructor, know who your student is, and taking them up in the middle of the day on a Saturday. And, it's not putting them in the best position to be successful. So know your students, know when to step in, know when the frequency is super busy. When you hear the frequency is saturated and your student is not responding immediately, every time that happens, we're having to say something twice or 3 times. You got to know when to step in, and that's no different than the expectation from us on the controller side. As we're training new controllers, we're expected to jump in and take over when we see that our student is falling behind. So have that awareness piece there. A pet peeve of mine lately is 1, 2, 3, or 5. I'm looking for a practice approach to Long Beach, and they're in the Long Beach practice area when they call. And 1205 Roger, squawk 0213, verify you have information Bravo. I don't have information Bravo yet. You're like, I thought you were ready for the approach. Like, I don't understand that. So that's a pet peeve myself. When you're ready for the approach and you're asking for the approach, make sure you have the ATIS to the airport you're going to, especially if it's real close to where you're going. Coming out of Lake Matthews, I'm sure it's the same frustration in the Empire area. I'm ready for approach into Chino. You got information Alpha? Nope. I mean, you're on the final at Chino almost. I mean, you're that close. You know, guys over Seal Beach trying to go into Fullerton. I'm over Seal Beach. I want a VOR full procedure turn. I'm ready for the practice approach. You have ATIS Alpha? No, we're going to go get it right now. Perfect. So that's a pet peeve of mine. But overall, I'm not going to lie to you. The pilots out here are fantastic. Do we have some frustrations on both sides? Absolutely. But that is a small percentage of really what we have going on here. It's fantastic piece of airspace to be part of.
I would add, as an instructor, especially an instrument instructor, have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D ready. If for some reason you can't do the exact approach you want, I've been shut out of the Inland Empire sector a lot of times lately. Get a plan B. Okay, well, I can't do multiple approaches at Chino. I'll go run over to Long Beach. And this worked out perfectly for me about a month ago. We were able to do 4 VOR 30s into Long Beach right in a row. And since we were working on the intercepting the final and then to turn at the final approach fix on the way in, we did that 4 times in a row. It was great. Could get nothing out of Riverside, Ontario, Chino, nothing. So like Mia said, hey, I need a VOR approach. Well, does it really matter which VOR approach it is? And if there's something else, it's going to be a little bit easier on SoCal. That's going to be easier on you too.
Okay, we got to stump the panelist questions, kind of.
Oh, no.
I've heard many different answers to this one. When do you expect us to switch to our destination altimeter setting as soon as we get the ATIS?
I'll let Mia or somebody else. I mean, for us, as long as you get the ATIS, you know, a quick history is if anything happens to a pilot, whether it happens in the air or whether it happens when they're landing, the first thing they ask air traffic control, did they have the weather or the altimeter? It is, and we have, you know, bad dreams about issuing the altimeter in our lives. So for us, I'm either you're going to tell me you have alpha or I'm going to issue that altimeter every single time so that that box is checked no matter what. So as long as, you know, you're on something that is close and it's showing your mode C is within 200, less than 300 feet legally, which is going to be 200 feet for us or less, we're going to probably be fine with whatever it's showing as long as it's 200 feet or less showing, which is really 300 feet or less for what's going on.
Mia had her hand up. She put it back down again.
All right, yeah, just a caveat to that. I would say the easy answer to that question is when I give you the Ontario altimeter, that's what everyone talking to me is using. And then when you are doing your pre-landing checklist, that's when I would switch over to Chino or Riverside. A real difference I've seen in altimeter settings in my airspace is the difference between Palm Springs and Ontario. You can have a 12-point difference. And so a lot of times on your initial check-in, I give you Ontario's altimeter setting because everyone I'm talking to is using that one. And that's for my separation. And then when you switch to the Banning Pass, I'll give you Palm Springs altimeter setting. Then you would switch to that one because you're still talking to me. And then you would go from there. And if you got the ATIS after that or something for Palm Springs, maybe you would switch it even more specifically then. But I would say if I'm talking to you and you're headed towards Riverside, but you're still over Big Bear, I would expect you to use the altimeter setting I gave you until you're within the point where you would do a pre-landing checklist. And that's kind of how I look at it because I'm using an altimeter setting for everyone for separation on my end. I'm not sure if that is 100% correct, but that's what makes sense to me. And you will see a huge difference in the altimeter setting between the west side of the Banning Pass and the east side of Banning Pass.
Or Victorville versus Ontario. There's frequently a huge difference there. And Big Bear is often very different from Ontario Riverside.
So if I give you an altimeter setting, then I would expect you to use that one until you get to, where you're getting close proximity to the airport you're going to. But that's just me.
No, I think that's a great answer, but let's answer one more question and then I think it's time to wrap it up. But
we got a marathon going here.
Yeah, that's all right. We still have 211 people on. That's fantastic.
Some real gluttons.
I'd like to say it's you and I, Mike, but I have a feeling it's Socal TRACON.
It's not me.
All right. So do you prefer military helicopter traffic to stay at 500 feet AGL for deconfliction, form other VFR, IFR traffic as opposed to 1500, 2500? Just curious what helps the controllers out more.
I would tell you, if you're up at 1,500 to 2,500 feet and you're going through our airspace, you're trying to talk to ATC some way, shape, or form. We had a near midair collision coming out of Corona, going into John Wayne with a military helicopter that to this day, we don't know if he even knew it happened. But we actually had a VFR aircraft come off of Corona, non-control tower, calls us as soon as he can. He's familiar with the airspace, low level, about 1,500 feet. As soon as he can talk to us, before the controller could even radar identify him, called a traffic alert. If you don't have him sight, turn left immediately. It was during sunset, like dusk. And that ended up being actually another controller at John Wayne who's also a pilot, and said if it wasn't for that turn, they would have had a collision with that military aircraft. Don't know if that it was a H-60. We don't know if they ever saw him or anything like that. But we never talked to military aircraft, and some of those guys, especially you got B-22s and stuff like that, doing all kinds of fun speeds. If you're going to get up above 1,000 feet, 1,500 feet, especially, you want to probably start to try to reach out in some way, some way, shape, or form, whether it's through us, the towers, whatever it is. Just because you start, especially getting up to 2,500 feet. You're definitely putting yourself up there with more of the fixed wing aircraft. Each situation is going to be a little bit different, but I always say, give us the chance, because you never know when that time's going to come that you need that traffic alert, and that we can be there to help you.
Agreed. That's always my public service announcement. Get on fly phone.
Yeah.
Or at least ask for it. But okay, well, Mike was just texting me that he's going to start a night IFR flight training academy. That's probably a good idea.
Yeah,
10-day
night to us.
1 o'clock in the morning, do it all night long when you can get all the approaches you want.
You give me 10 nights, you get your instrument rating.
Piece of cake. We can knock it out.
Well, thanks, Rob and Mia and Steve and Alex and
Rob. Where are you speaking coming up here in the next couple of weeks?
So tomorrow night we'll be with the FAA safety team. I know some folks have asked that. If you're not familiar,
Wait, I thought we were this FAA safety team.
Yeah, and it's they do. If people are not familiar, they do different presentations in different parts of the airspace in the country, and the presentation blast or emails go out only if you're registered with the FAST team, and to certain demographics. They can set the distance in which they want to set those emails out. So tomorrow's is down here with the FAST team out of San Diego, but it'll be more specific to San Diego with a lot of the same stuff still though, but with the San Diego airspace, but it'll also be via Zoom. And then next Thursday is the Bracket IMC Club. So that one will be a little more specific to the airspace around Bracket. If either one of those will hit you, we'd love to have you. I know the Bracket guys that set up theirs, we assured them that there'll be some more specific information to their airspace. So we'll get focused more on the Inland Empire area with that one. But that's next Thursday night. And then tomorrow night is the San Diego more focused one. But I will put out the disclaimer or the invite. If anybody here again thinks that they could benefit their flying group, their school, their whoever it is, and you want to join or you'd like us to come out and speak with you guys specifically, send me an email specifically. You can send Thomas Gordon an email all you want. I can promise what he's going to do with that is send it right to me. So you might as well just reach out to me and I'll set that up with you guys as soon as we possibly can with the schedules. And we usually can do them any day of the week at any time of the day with enough notice. So whatever works best for your group, we'll try to make something work. And if it can't be one of us here, there's other people that are more than willing to go out and do a similar presentation for you guys. So before you kick me out of here, Nate, I just again want to say thank you to you and Mike for your continued partnership and friendship, and to everybody out there. We truly are fortunate to have the team that we do out here in the airspace between the pilots and the controllers. And just to reiterate earlier, I promise you that the team inside of SCT, both NACA and management, those of us who are grinding every day, we are doing everything we can to take care of you guys. And I know it could be a little frustrating. I know sometimes you may not get everything that you want, but I promise you that we're trying our best to do that without jeopardizing safety in any way, shape, or form. So thank you guys very much for coming out tonight. It's an impressive amount of turnout for sure.
Want to do this again?
I hope to do it every quarter, to be honest with you, if we can.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But, you know, big thanks to Mike. I know we're thanking everybody, but how this all went down, Rob called me, said this would be a good idea. I called Mike immediately. Mike said, let's do it, and made it all happen real fast. So thanks for everything, Mike.
Sure, you bet.
Yeah, definitely.
And we're going to have to send out an email to everybody to vote for you for Fast Team National Rep of the Year.
That'd be awesome. Sure, why
Yeah.
not?
All right, so all of you that are still on, sooner or later, I'm going to send you where to send an email to vote Mike Jesh for that, because he's definitely the guy.
Awesome. Well, it's been a pleasure to be a part of this with both of you. Thank you for asking. Thank you for the opportunity to do it. And I'm glad we were able to pull it off. So it's worthwhile doing this kind of thing.
All right, guys, have a good night.
Good night, everybody.
everybody.
Thank you again.
See ya.